All right, welcome everybody. We are back for another fun episode of Lessons with Leah. I'm Coach Stacie with Gymnastics Mindset Academy here with Leah Clapper, and we are continuing on our series of following Leah, her final senior year, as she really goes with the Gators after a national title. So, Leah, how is it going this week?
This week has been good so far. We had a great practice yesterday. Our conditioning was absolutely brutal, but I felt so good after practice that I had accomplished a lot of things in gymnastics and just that I worked hard. I think that's the best feeling ever when you get home from practice and you're totally exhausted, but you feel so satisfied with the day and that you made progress and
I
are
love it.
stronger now.
Yeah.
So, it was a good start to the week. I've got another practice today and again on Thursday before our meet.
Yeah.
I know you're gonna ask me about my ankle, so I'll just give you the
Give
update
us the update.
that I have been getting back to doing floor routines on beam and on the rod floor, which is really exciting. I know
Yay!
last week we talked a lot about feeling a little bit hopeless, like things weren't
Yeah.
improving as fast as I wanted them to when I was feeling frustrated. And I think that the past few days have been a good reminder to just trust the process and
Mm,
stay the course
yeah.
because, things can flip-flop so fast.
Yeah.
Um, so that was really exciting to get back to full beam routines last week, and I felt ready to compete, that I was ready if my team needed me. Of course, my coaches weren't gonna put me in the lineup with 1 day of practice before the meet, but I was able to warm up when we were at Alabama, our first away meet of the season, which went amazing, and, I nailed all my warm-ups and have been doing some more stuff in the gym this week. So that was a massive improvement from the week before, and I think that those circumstances helped my mindset a little bit, but now I need to, nothing's gonna go perfect
Yeah.
moving forward, so I need to have a good mindset even when things maybe aren't going as
Yeah.
perfectly planned.
Which is really hard to do, but it is helpful to take a look back when things start going better at going like, "Okay, what do I wanna remember for next time I'm in this kind of scenario?" Like, obviously for you, this is your final season, so preparing for the next time you're injured, it can't that's probably not a thing, right? But, like, you can still take this forward with you of, like, when I'm disappointed and things aren't going how I want and they things look bad,
Yeah.
negative, like, looking back, what would you wanna tell yourself of 2 weeks ago?
I well, first of all, I wanna say that, like, I don't ever like to expect things to go wrong, and I don't think that's a fun way to live your life, worrying, and that's something that we've
Yeah.
talked about a ton because then you
Yeah.
feel the anxiety and the disappointment and the worry and all of those bad emotions twice. But being able to remind yourself that, "Hey, if and when things aren't going my way for whatever reason, like, I'm strong enough to make it through." And I
Mm.
would wanna tell my 2 weeks ago self that just take a breath
Mm.
and stay present and stay the course because you just don't know what's coming next, and we had talked about, "Oh, it could be great, it could be bad," but focusing on that hope. Just have faith and keep trusting the process. And I like to think of everything can be a blessing in disguise. So, trying to just remind yourself that. I think that's really hard to do in practice. It's easy to say, but just keeping coming back to that things can be a blessing in disguise. On another note, going back to the improvements of the week, kind of the update, an interesting takeaway was that I'm actually changing my floor routine for the time being because the double pike is still worrying me a little bit with my foot, and in order to protect it, I got a little bit creative with my coaches on what we could do to protect my ankle and not have so much pounding while it's still healing a little bit. So I'm now working on a 1.5 foot layout for my last pass, which I can do really easily, and then keeping my Rudy layout for my first pass, which means that that will satisfy almost all of the requirements, but I need another D level skill. And that can be a dance skill or anything. And I was thinking in my mind that I can't do a D dance skill. I'm horrible at leaps and turns. And it'd be so risky because I won't make it around most of the time, probably. But I was having hope that we could find a creative solution so that I could do this other pass that will be ready before my double pike is back on the floor. And my coach Jenny was like, "What about a switch side half? Your switch sides are really good, and I think you could do it easily." And in my head, I'm going, I can't do that. I remember I trained that in Elite and I never made it around. I think I was actually trying it on the beam in Elite, but I was like thinking in my mind, this isn't going to work out, but I'm going to try, of course. And I did it once and it was the easiest thing ever. I just like boop, went all the way around, and Jenny was like, yeah, that was actually pretty fabulous." And so it was just like a little 5-minute thing, but a lesson that you don't know until you try.
Yeah,
And you don't need to jump to conclusions on what you can and can't do. Of course, being logical is always a good thing and safe, but sometimes things might come naturally to you that you don't expect, and so might as well give it a go.
I love that. I was talking with my coach this week. I always go for the ends of the spectrum. Like, it's gonna be terrible and there's no options, or it has to, like, it's gotta go perfect. So, coming back to a floor routine, like, either I don't compete or I do the double pike. And she's like, "There's always a middle ground. There's
Yeah,
always, like, some other options that if you stop going to the extremes and you come to the middle, you usually can find a solution." It's when your brain is focused on, like, "Well, the only way I can do it is if I can do this thing," that's when you stay stuck. But when your brain comes back around to, like, "Okay, but what could be some other middle options?" So I
yeah,
love that because this is such a great example, because it wasn't a one-step answer. It wasn't like, "Oh, well, I could just replace it with this." Like, you had to be creative and figure out those other options, but when you're open to them, you totally can.
absolutely.
I love that. That's really great. Awesome. Well, is there any specific thing you wanna coach on this week?
I think there's a couple of options that we could talk
Okay.
about. One of them being, now that like I'm routine ready, I can go out there and compete. Um,
Yay.
that's so exciting. I'm so like ecstatic about that
Yeah,
possibility, and pumped to get back out there
yeah.
because it's not really fun sitting on the sidelines. I hated it, as we've talked about. But now there's a whole new set of challenges, which are good problems to have, of course. But like, all right, I'm ready to compete, but I need to make the lineup. And I know that's not something that most club gymnasts who might be listening to this
Right.
are worried about, because in club, you're going to compete the events that you can do. But it is something that's interesting. I've had a lot of experience with having to push myself to get into the lineup before, so I feel pretty good about that, that I'm just gonna do my best and go to practice with intention every day to the best of my ability and show that, I'm ready, and wait until my name is called. And then the other thing that is like a new stressor as well is, okay, so when I make the lineup, yay, I get to compete at some point, but now I gotta compete. I get to compete. And I haven't had as much competition. What my mind is going to, which is completely illogical, is that I haven't had much competition experience and all my teammates have been competing, but am I
Like,
ready
I'm
to
in meet 1 and they're in meet
perform?
5.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what if I let my team down? And what if I mess up and then I never get to compete again because then the coaches don't wanna put me in the lineup because I blew my one chance that was already late from the beginning of season, and all of this crazy stuff that is,
Yeah.
not spiraling in a bad way, but silly doubts that
Right.
it reminds me that, no experience? Well, that's not exactly true because I competed in all the inner squads up in through December and the beginning of January, and then I am in my 5th year of college gymnastics. I did competitive gymnastics since I was in 1st grade. I have competed a lot of times on beam, and out of the past 5 years, I have messed up at an actual competition a very small number of times.
Yeah.
I make most of them, and I make most of them in practice.
Yeah.
And so the likelihood of me making them in a meet, as long as I have a good mindset, is very high.
Yeah.
And I've done it many times before, so actually I can do it. And so that if I do it right, that takes away all the problems of, blowing it.
Yeah.
And it brings a bunch of pride and excitement. Like, I'm thinking about the feeling of nailing a routine at a
Yeah.
meet, and I haven't gotten to experience that since
Yeah.
last season, and I am so excited for that feeling. I know it's gonna be so sweet when it comes,
Yeah.
and I believe that it will.
Yeah.
There's a couple hurdles to get there,
Yeah.
and, that's just, like, kind of where my mind is going right now, and would love to talk
Well,
through
and
it a little bit.
what you did is right in that process while we were talking was what we talked about last week. It's equal airtime.
Yeah,
Yes, your brain is going to tell you that this is your only chance, that you might not even make the lineup, and then if you do, you might blow it, and then you'll never make it again. That's your brain. It's how it's wired. Its job is to be on the lookout for things that it considers dangerous to you. And so it's like imagine like a submarine with its little sonar. It's just like beep beep looking for like I got to be on the lookout for any potential problems coming my way.
yeah,
It's going to look at those and that is normal and letting it be like that's normal. That's okay, but
mhm,
then shifting your brain to looking at the other what ifs. So,
yeah,
what if I don't make it? But what if I do? Then,
yeah,
what if I don't have enough experience? Oh, but I actually do have enough experience. Like,
right.
in fact, if I actually put out routine for routine, I probably have more experience than almost anyone else on the team.
I
Like,
mean, it's
a
definitely
lot of them are
fun.
freshmen, sophomores, and you're a fifth-year senior, like, you have a lot more experience than most gymnasts, not just on your team, but that will be out on any competition floor.
Yeah,
And then, what if I mess up? Okay, but much more likely, I'm gonna nail it, and all that feeling and, like, living in that moment of how great it feels,
yeah.
like, that's how we get our brain back on board.
I'm smiling so big right
I
now.
know. Those
Amazing.
of you who can't see the video, you need to, like, tune into our YouTube channel. Um, but so we just have to, like, not make it a problem that our brain tells us those.
Yeah,
We just look at it like a little kid throwing a tantrum.
yeah,
Like, you just when you see a little kid throwing a tantrum and you're like, "Oh, bless his heart, bless her heart," like, she just wants that candy bar, like, she's just screaming on the floor at the checkout stand, like, just what little kids do. Like, it's not this, like, crazy problem.
I
But
love that perspective because when I started thinking those thoughts, it's like, "Oh, why am I thinking this?" Or I should be excited about the possibility, and now I'm worried. But remembering that that's so normal, and I think every meet that I've ever had, I've thought those things, and it makes me feel like myself a little bit again, which is good. But just looking at it and being like, "Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
competing is a str exciting thing, and pressure is a privilege." Like, there is pressure there,
Yeah.
and along with that can come some nerves, and that's perfectly normal, but that doesn't mean that I can't do well,
Yeah.
and it
Well, and
doesn't mean that it won't go well, and that I won't have that absolute amazing routine that I wanna have.
yeah. Well, and it goes back to the advice that I asked you, what would you tell yourself 2 weeks ago? And one of the things you said, "If things go badly, I'm strong enough to handle it."
Yeah,
So just also reminding yourself as your brain imagines things that could go badly, you will be able to handle it. You have the mindset tools of being able to process any emotion that comes at you. You know that your worth and your value is not made up with how you perform, and so you'll be able to, like, move past that. This isn't gonna mean for the rest of your life you're worthless.
yeah,
And you know that, you can trust yourself to do the things that you say you're gonna do. And you've, like, done all of the work, and you can prove to yourself that you do have the tools to handle it if it doesn't go well. So we kind of both, like, go, "Oh, of course, there's my little brain." But we also can answer it with the, like, because all that our brain is doing is going, "I need you to be aware of the problems that can come up so that you're ready to handle it." So sometimes we're like, "Yeah, yeah, brain. Okay, I hear you." But other times we need to tell our brain, like, "No, I am aware and I am ready to handle it. So
yeah.
we're good. We don't need to keep worrying about that one because we're good. We're prepared for it."
And really all I need to do to compete beam at a meet is the same thing that I do in practice every day now. One movement at a time. I raise my hands, I salute, I mount the beam, I swing my arms and jump. All things I've done thousands of times, and I
Yeah.
know exactly what to do. And just taking a breath
Yeah.
and being grateful for the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to get to that point. I also know that once the coaches put me back in the lineup, that means that they think I'm ready. And
Yeah.
usually I'm ready before they think I'm ready. So I can fully trust, like, they're not going to put me in there if they don't fully believe in me.
Yeah.
And because I kind of have their back and I have the backings of my teammates, like, I need to remember that I'm not in it alone. I have so many
Mhm.
people that are supporting me, my family, my coaches, my teammates, and they just all wanna see me succeed
Yeah.
and are there to support me.
Yeah.
And, you know, taking that step back and remembering that it's not all about me, it's about the team too. I know for different people, it feels a different way, but for me, that's always taken the pressure off. Like, "Oh, I'm not doing this because I really want to have a great routine for myself," which of course I do.
Yeah.
But when there's the responsibility of the team, it just feels like I feel like something just lifts a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it.
Like, it's not about me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do wanna go back to that because you brought it up kind of before. We didn't talk about it last week in the recording, but we talked about it, before we recorded, and then you brought it up again, this idea of letting down your teammates.
Mhm.
And the thing that we're talking about this week in our program is how to treat yourself like your own best friend, how to be your own best friend. And you and I talked about this weeks ago about positive self-talk and how you talk to yourself when something doesn't go well versus how you would talk to your teammates. So I
Yeah.
want to bring that all together in one little package to think about, Like your thought is, I don't want to disappoint my teammates. I don't want to disappoint my coach. I don't want to disappoint myself. But I want to take that first one and like, how do you, like, what are your thoughts when one of your teammates falls in competition?
I mean, I am certainly not mad at them. I feel sad for them because I know that's not how they wanted to perform, and I've been there too, so it's not a fun thing, so there's a bit of sympathy there, and it's almost like you just wanna give them a hug, and sometimes not everybody wants a hug after they did poorly, and we're also good as gymnasts about getting to be super hard on ourselves, but yeah, it's the utmost support. I mean, I'm definitely not thinking, "Oh, they blew it for our team." It's like, "Oh, like, I'm so sorry for them that, like, now they have to deal with those emotions that
Yeah.
come with not doing well." Like, it's not fun, and, um, most of the time, like, everybody else has their back.
Yeah.
Like, if one person falls, we can count one fall, and so it's an interesting dynamic in college gymnastics that we just move forward as a team and,
Yes.
somebody else is gonna pick up the slack, and if it doesn't happen, then, we just weren't the best team out there that day.
Yeah.
But I
But
would
if
not
you
be mad at a teammate, so why would I be mad at myself?
exactly. So when your brain tells you, I don't want to disappoint my teammates, the reality is you know that if your teammates fall, it never disappoints you in them, right? And so you're never there, you're not disappointing them in you.
Yeah.
You're only disappointing yourself.
Mhm.
And
There's
so
a
if you can come in and be supportive of yourself in the same way that you would support your teammate. Yes, you're going to be compassionate that you fell. That
Mhm.
sucks. We always tell our gymnasts falling is fine. And they're like, "What?" And we're like, "Falling isn't fun. Falling isn't fantastic. We're not telling you to be like, "Oh, I fell." But falling is fine." And we can be compassionate about the part that feels sad. But we
Mhm.
also don't have to we also can come in and be supportive and give ourselves like, literally, give yourself a hug. I
Yeah.
mean, not I always say literally, but, like, I mean, if it feels good, like, wrap your arms around yourself, pat yourself on the back, give yourself a hug, be supportive, but emotionally give yourself a hug.
Yeah.
"Oh, honey, I know that feels terrible. That's okay. Just
Yeah.
be supportive of yourself in the same way."
Yeah.
So, if you 100% believe, if I go to a competition and I fall, I am gonna treat myself the same way I would treat my teammates. I'm gonna have compassion. I'm gonna give myself a big hug. I'm gonna know that the whole meet doesn't right on my one routine, that my teammates are gonna rally around me the same way I always would rally around them, and we're gonna move forward as a team. Does it
Yeah.
feel less nervous about falling?
Well, equal airtime
Yeah.
can also, you know,
Yeah.
be a person that contributes to the team's awesomeness
Mhm.
and get that support because I did something great.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
it still doesn't feel like a good
It's not gonna feel good, and we
scenario,
don't
but
want it
it
like,
won't.
we don't want it to feel good, right?
No,
That's not the
no,
point. We just want
exactly.
our brain to know again, our brain's looking sonar.
Mhm.
We want our brain to know that if the situation happened, we can totally handle it,
Yeah.
and we're gonna treat ourselves well. Because what our brain is afraid of is what we're gonna say to ourselves that night. Our brain is afraid it's kind of like the little kid that, like, you're out in public with your parent, and then you know that you're in big trouble, and when you get home, like, you're gonna be in trouble, and, like, you're kind of in that, like, "I'm afraid of going home because I know, like, I'm gonna be in so much trouble when I get home." Your brain is doing that about yourself. It's like, if we
Interesting.
fall, I know when we get home and we're alone with our thoughts, the things I'm going to tell myself, I'm terrified of. And that's what we're most afraid of. So when we can know, like, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to have our back. Just the same way I have my teammates back, we're going to have our own back. It'll be okay. Because our brain is afraid of what will happen. When we can let our brain know that it's going to be safe, if that happens, it can stop worrying about it.
Interesting.
So we
Uh,
do both.
yeah. I think as far as this conversation, it reminds me a lot of the loss aversion bias,
Yeah. Tell me
that
more.
you're more your brain is more concerned about losing something than gaining something of similar
Yes.
value. So if you had $100 and then you dropped it on the street and lost it, you're gonna have a more emotional turmoil than if you went and found $100 somewhere.
Yes. Yes.
You're gonna be kicking yourself a lot more than you're celebrating when you find $100.
Yes.
And that kind of goes for any scenario, but I think with gymnastics, we are we are so hard on ourselves when we mess up, and, like,
Mm.
losing that, like, feeling of nailing a routine is so much more stressful than, like, the equal celebration of when it goes well. Sometimes when things go well, it's like, "Oh, like, good, that was fine.
Yeah.
Um, I'm glad, it was fine." But we don't celebrate the wins as much to that equal magnitude of, like, when you make a routine, you're like 5 minutes, you got a smile on your face, and then it's on to the next.
Yes.
To the next event, to the next practice, whatever it is. But if something goes wrong, even if it's something really small, like a wobble on a turn or a miscast handstand or steps on your vault landing, whatever it is, you might be kicking yourself for like the whole time until the next meet.
Yeah.
And it's like, why did we spend 5 minutes thinking
Yes.
about when it went well, but 5 whole days feeling bad that it didn't go well?
Yeah. And like you talked about last week, there's never a time that it all goes well, because that's just not human, and that's okay. And but so if we're setting ourselves up for that, we're setting ourselves to always be in this perpetual not enjoying ourselves, right? Not enjoying the experience.
Yeah.
I went to a huge meet this weekend to watch one of the girls that I coach, and I was sitting in the parents or in the stand with the parents, which, I coached gymnastics for so long that like sitting in the stands still feels really weird. So I was
Yeah.
sitting in the stands, and another family behind me was, talking about, and so the kid had like gotten her best score ever on the first two events on each of them. And then on floor, she like stepped out of her tumbling pass and did like two steps backwards. And she was like visibly angry, shaken, mad. And her grandma just kept going, I don't understand. She got like within like 0.05 tenths of the same score that she had gotten the last week when she had had an amazing routine.
Yeah.
And she had just had two of her best events ever. And she was like, how is she ruining her time out there, like, over one step, And she was like you could tell she, like, was super mad and frustrated and trying not to cry, and then they, like, walked over to the next event. They had to wait a long time for the next event, and you could
Yeah.
just see in her body language how, like, defeated she was. She had done her 2 best scores ever.
Yeah.
Now, the funny part of the story is she went on to then do vault and got a 9.7 as a level
Woo!
7, and it was, like, her best score ever. So they were like, "Alright, obviously it's like, she's doing fine now," or something like that, but it was just funny to watch the ride, and
Yeah.
just kinda like, at the end of the day, we have to know that our brain is gonna work this way, and that's okay, but it's a choice. It's optional. We actually don't have to experience gymnastics and life that way if we don't want to.
Yeah.
We can supervise our brain. We can redirect it. It's kind of like, clouds floating in the sky. There's just lots of them floating by, and we can decide which one we're going to reach out and focus on.
Yeah.
And we can know that the clouds are going to float by and tell us they're disappointed or tell us we might do bad or all of the things. But we don't have to stay focused on those if we don't want to. We can refocus. Our brain is like a flashlight. We just move where the flashlight's pointing onto the things that are going to help us not just do well and go out there and nail it, but to
Mhm.
enjoy the entire experience as well.
Totally. And that's a really great story. Thank you for sharing. I bet that gymnast was kicking herself though about that floor pass just because we like to focus on the
I
negative,
know.
just with that how
Yeah.
humans are wired.
Yeah,
I need to remind myself that I think that's one of my strengths.
it
It's
is.
focusing on the positive and finding that little bright side in things. My club coaches always used to tell me that, and my parents, and
Claudia
I
and I were actually talking. So Claudia's Leah's old club coach, and we work with her team, and we are coming to your meet this weekend.
I
So
know.
excited. So she and I
Yeah.
were like talking about plans, and we were talking about the podcast, and she was saying, "Yeah, Leah's always been that way. She's always been able to be like I'll be like, "Well, this didn't go well." And she's like, "So you're saying this went well?"
Yes, I remember a few experiences that really stand out, and one of them was at PNG Championships, which I don't think is no any longer sponsored by PNG, but the USA National Gymnastics Elite Championships.
Yeah.
Like, the national championships, biggest meet of my life in elite in all of gymnastics, and, it's in this big arena on podium with tons of fans in the stands, televised on TV. I don't think I was necessarily in the broadcast, but I was on some live streams, and
Well, they mostly just broadcast, like, people looking at grips and
yeah, all of the leaderboard toppers. But it was a big deal.
yeah.
That was my biggest goal of my elite gymnastics was to compete at this meet. And I was just super excited to be there. I was really grateful that I made it and I was happy to have the experience, but I did awful. And day 1 of competition, I started on beam, my first skill of the whole experience. I split the beam so hard on my back handspring, back layout. There's a video. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. But I just jammed my crotch on the beam, went underneath, did one of those koala bear things, and I stayed on. And so I'm koala bear or sloth, whatever you wanna call it, looking like underneath the beam, but I didn't fall to the floor. And I'm like, "I didn't fall. I'm not touching the ground." And I somehow got myself to, like, get back up on the beam using my muscles, and I was just kind of laughing. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just turned myself into a meme here at the national championships with my splitting the beam and crawling back on." And then I was just kind of, like, smiling a little bit the rest of the beam routine. Obviously, I was like, "Oh, why did I do that?" But it was a little bit funny, and I knew that I was gonna laugh about it later, and
Yeah.
so I was kinda like, "Why don't I just laugh about it now?" And I
Yeah.
think the rest of the routine was actually really good. Somehow I got my mind together for the rest of the minute and a half and, nailed most everything else, and I think the first thing that I said when I got off the beam, I was like, "Well, my front tuck was really good," because it was one of the best ones that I had done, and my coach just started laughing.
But it is true, it's helpful, it's like, it's not actually helpful to experience it the other way, right?
Right, and I
Yeah.
think, remembering that that is one of my superpowers.
Yes.
Being able to look at the bright side. So, why am I starting to,
Yes.
focus on the negative and
Yeah.
put extra pressure on myself when I know that that's not who I am and I don't need to be thinking that way?
Yeah.
So,
And knowing that you're going like, your brain is gonna offer it to you, and that's okay. It can pass by like a cloud floating by.
Yeah.
We don't have to make it mean like, "Oh, no, now what's wrong? Why am I thinking negative?" You're just like, "Oh, it's just my brain's little sonar doing its thing. It's fine," and just let it pass on by.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think sometimes I see other people stress out about, you know, that kind of stuff. And so then it's like, well, I should be stressing out about it too, but
Mhm.
really, it's just gymnastics. And
Yeah.
as we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, I think a good like bring it all together is, of not being able to compete and realizing that hey, we're just out in the arena doing what we love for a
Yes.
bunch of adoring fans and get to have fun along the way
Yeah.
and taking that mindset into the future meets, whether hopefully I'm competing or if I don't make the lineup, that's just what happened. Um, but remembering that I can take a breath and just really enjoy and savor this experience because I only get it once.
I was just coaching a girl who was struggling right before I got on with you, and, she was talking about always rushing through her skills, and so I was like, one of the things when I talk to gymnasts who have retired, one of the things they talk about the most is how much they miss the feeling of flipping, and
Mhm.
I was like, yes, gymnastics feels like a long time, but it really is a short period of your life. And what if you savored every single time you got to flip? What if every time was like, oh, that was like a delicious bite of dessert? Like I got to feel the feeling of flipping because I love it,
Yeah,
and you just savored it all. And I had the privilege of coaching Michaela Skinner some during uh, her last Olympic run.
right.
And it was kind of the same in like nationals. She just wanted to like get it over with so she could get onto Olympic trials. And it's like this is going to be your last nationals. Like, what if you go out there and literally savor every moment? And it just made such a difference for her. So I think for you too, like just
Yeah.
focusing on savoring the experience and just enjoy. Like, this is a wonderful. Like, you're not a big dessert eater. I'm trying to think of something else, but like this is, like, the most, like, delicious thing I get to, like, just savor the moment.
Yeah, I can savor a double chocolate fudge brownie
This
with
is a
some ice cream.
yeah, we're not talking like a cookie that's, like, in a package, like, this is, like, a well-made gourmet dessert that you
Yeah.
get to take a bite of every day.
Well, shout out to my mom, though, she makes the best cookies.
I love homemade cookies. Alright. On that note, let's wrap up. Anything that you want to say to gymnasts listening about kind of this idea of positive self-talk and like letting it be your superpower?
Yeah, I think, like, let's all together try to be our own best friends this week and just see where that takes us.
Love it. All right. See you next week. Well,
Sounds
I will
good?
see you on Friday.
Woo! Let's go.
Yay. Bye.
Bye.